In this video, we're going to talk about lighting and materials. But before we do that, I want to quickly introduce you to the Viewport Shading in Blender. So if you go to the top right corner right here, you'll have 4 different icons, and those are Viewport Shading icons. Now you can either click on them like this to access different shading, or you can use a simple keyboard shortcut. Now the beautiful thing about shortcuts, you can do them anywhere. So you can be over here and press Z, and you'll have those Viewport Shading icons. You can go to wireframe, which is the first icon. So wireframe shading gives you exactly what you would expect. It gives you wireframe look. You can see the edges of your objects. You can see the topology of your objects, and you can also select things behind your objects, which is nice. Then the second icon is the solid shading, and it gives you a solid shading. You can go over here and adjust like the studio lighting, the matte cap, like if you're working like sculpting or something like that, this might come in handy. So you get the idea. You can kind of shuffle through different ones, and they will help you big time. Then we have this random. Let me go to this one. The random one is actually pretty cool. If you click on it, it kind of assigns a random color to each object. So if you have a bunch of objects, that can come in very handy, but you get the idea. So I'm going to go back to default. So that's solid shading. Then the third icon is the material preview shading. And this one is very handy. Now it is important that you know that this view right here is only for previewing purposes. This is not the final result. This is only to preview your materials to see what they would look like under different HDRIs, environments, and things of that nature. So for example, I can go over here and I can shuffle through different HDRIs like this one, that one. I can see what things might look like in the studio or outside or at night, and you get the idea. So you can quickly see what things will look like under different HDRIs without loading things up. So it will speed things up for you. You can rotate things. You can adjust the strength, the blurriness. It's super handy. So this is a material preview shading. Now the last one right here is the final render. It's called rendered shading. All right, so let's make some render settings adjustments. And for that, we're gonna go to render properties by clicking on this icon here. And then we're gonna go and make sure render engine is set to EV. Then we're gonna go to ambient occlusion, make sure it's checked. The same thing for bloom. Bloom will help us for these lights right here. It allows us to sell that light effect big time. You'll see it later on. Then this screen space reflections. In fact, let me show you. We're going to go to material preview shading. Let's go to something like studio. So right here, we have this wall right here, but we don't really have it in a reflection. So if you go over here and check this screen space reflections, now it shows up. So that's going to come in very handy. So if you want to have any kind of reflections, you want to make sure this one is checked. Now motion blur, I'm going to avoid it for this one. It's not as good in this version, but I hear in the next version of Blender, it's going to be amazing. So then we're going to go to film, and that's where we're going to adjust the transparent. So if we go to the rendered view, right now we see this gray color right here. But if we click on transparent checkbox, then it becomes transparent. So it's going to come in very handy later on. So next, the very last thing, we're going to go to color management, and we're going to change this from filmic to standard. And what the standard does, it basically crushes the blacks and allows us to have that contrasty look that I like for this particular project. Now, filmic is great, but for this project, standard is going to come in very handy. So now let's go to our light. We have all these collections that we have created. We're going to go to camera and light collection, and we're going to select this default light. So we already do have a light in our scene. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to select it. We're going to go to transform properties, and I'm going to zero everything out in here. So just zero everything out. I'm using a tab key, by the way. And there you go. Everything is 0 on location, rotation. So now it is in the origin of our scene. So we can pull on it and right about, let's do like -10 on Y. And then we're going to push it up like this to 10. There you go. So now it is right at the top here. It's only a point light, so it's not like we wanted to have more of a like an area light. And to do that, we're going to go to right here, this icon, click on it, and we have some options in here. We have point, right now it's set to point, but we want to set it to area. When you do that, you have more options. So shape, make sure it's set to rectangle. And now we can kind of create our shape. So on X size, make sure to take it to something like 60. As you can see, it's a lot longer now. And because of that, the light is not as bright because now it's emitting that light kind of throughout the whole thing. So we'll have to increase that light here shortly. So then on Y, we're going to increase that as well to something like 10. And let's crank up the power. We're going to say something like 7,000. So it's definitely bright now. Then make sure you select the light. We're going to go back to transform properties. We're going to go to rotation X. We're going to rotate it 45 degrees to where it's looking right at that screen. So essentially it's kind of highlighting that area. It's giving us nice little highlights around those bevels, which is really good. It's going to pop them a bit. And it also creates like a gradient. It's dark at the top because of this area. It's going to creating a shadow, and then it's brighter right here. Now, here's another thing I want to do before we wrap this up. So go to light options, and we're going to go to shadow, and then make sure this contact shadows is checked. All right, so let's create our very first material. It's going to be material for these ceiling lights. So these right here, that's what we're going to create. And before we do that, I want to kind of create my own layout here because Blender is so flexible. You can create your own layouts. Obviously, you already have ones in here that you can choose from, but I'm going to show you how to quickly create your own. You can just hover your mouse over the top left corner like this and click and drag, and then you can just split it into like this, very easy. And if you want to split it again, you can just go over here, and instead of going down, we're going to go to the side, and then it's going to split it to the side. So now we have 3 windows. Very handy. And if you need to merge some, you can just hover like this and just push it this way. It will merge it, push it that way. It's very flexible. So let's do the same thing again. Let's split it a couple of times. And for this area, I'm going to click here, and we're going to click on this shader editor. And then for this one, we're going to click on this icon. We're going to go to UV editor. So we have UV editor, we have shader editor, and we also have this just a 3D view. So that's the setup. And we also want to activate an add-on called Node Wrangler. So just go to Edit, Preferences. You know, Blender comes with all kinds of tools that you might not even know about, and a lot of them are turned off. So you'd be surprised what you can find under add-ons. You can find all kinds of stuff. This is not the official list. We also have testing ones. I mean, we have all kinds of them, and you can go online and find other ones as well. So if you're coming from another software and you're trying to do something that Blender doesn't have, you know, by default, chances are there's some kind of an add-on that will get you there, or halfway there at least. So we're going to type here Node, and make sure Node Wrangler, this one right here, make sure it's checked because we do need that one for this one. All right, so then here's what we're going to do. Again, make sure to select the lights. And you can also do it in here, just select it in here. And then we're going to go to this icon right here for materials. Right now, we have no materials at all, but obviously you do want to see your materials. So let's go to the rendered view. Okay, that's what we're going to be looking at. And we're going to create a new material. So select it, new material. And right now, by default, it gives us this principled material. And it's great and all, but we want emission. We want to emit lights. And by the way, I want to show you the difference between, so this area right here is for like if you do nodes, if you build materials using nodes, it's very handy. I do it this way, but obviously you also have an option to do it manually in here. So all of these controls that you see here are in this node, but I just want to show you that you can do it in here, but you can also do it in here, but you want to make sure you use nodes. It's checked. And yeah, it's a bit different, but you can easily add on things so that you have way more flexibility, you have way more control doing it this way, but you can also change things in here. So for example, let me show you. So you can either, let's say I need to switch this shader to something like emission. I can either go over here to surface and click on emission, boom, it changes to emission. But notice it does it here as well. But I can go over here and just do Shift S to replace, and then I can go to shader and emission. So it's the same concept in here. I can bring in another emission by either pressing add, right? And then shader and then emission, and then we can put things in here. It's the same concept in Blender, Shift A, right? It's the same thing, add. Shift A here will give you an object. Shift A will bring you whatever you're working with, like a node, right? So Shift A, we can go to input and we can click on any of that stuff, or we can search for things. Shift A is your best friend anywhere, really. It's super handy. So I just want to show you the relationship, right? You can change things in here. You can change the material name in here, but you can also do it in here as well. So it's the same relationship. That's all I wanted to show you. So we have emission here, and I do want to select a particular orange that we're going to pick from a folder here. So I'm going to say over here in the UV editor, I'm going to say open. We're going to go to this folder, and we're going to go to images. We're going to select this right here, this color swatch, double click on it, and now we have it in here. So those are the colors we're going to be using for this project. So I need this orange. So I want this color. I can either do it here, right, and change it to orange, right? Or I can click here and do the same thing there. So I can pick this orange, and now that's the orange we have. And as you can see, it is that orange. But watch this. When I crank up the strength, again, you can do it here or there. If I crank this up to something like 300, it gets very hot, right? So now it looks like lights, and that's where we activated this bloom. That's what this bloom does. You can see it gives this light kind of feel, and you can go in here, you can adjust things in here. You definitely have way more control, and it is awesome. So that's how we create lights, and hopefully you can see the difference between creating it here or there. It's the same concept. But before we close this one out, I want to rename this. So we're going to go over here, and instead of it just saying material, we're going to click here. We're going to call this one ceiling lights. And notice we changed it in here, but we can also do the same thing in here as well. So we can do it in both places. All right, so let's create materials for our floor and the ceiling. So we're going to start with the floor first. We're going to select the floor, and then you can either go to the material tab in here and create a new material in here, or you can do the same thing again in this shader editor as well. So you can create a new material, and again, the same concept here. We have a new material. Let's call this one stripes. And we're going to change the base color from white to something more dark, something like 0.05, pretty much black color. And then here's what we're going to do. We're going to select this node. And because we have activated Node Wrangler, we can do this. We can press Control T, and it will automatically add 3 more nodes, which is very helpful. We don't have to go and search for them ourselves. So these 3 nodes basically grab the UVs from whatever object, right? And then we have this mapping node. We can adjust our texture. We can move it around. We can rotate it. And then obviously this is the texture itself. You can either bring in an image. In our case, we're going to use a texture node called brick. So we're going to replace this one. So select this one, hit Shift S. If you don't have this, it's because Node Wrangler is not activated. So make sure you activate that. And then you can replace this for texture, brick texture. When you click on it, it will just replace it, which is great. So now you can see that it is working. As you can see, that's exactly what we want. We can adjust it in here. We can say size to something like 50. So it's tiny. And then we're going to adjust the color 1, 2, and this one as well. So color 1, let's take it to something like 0.8. And let's go over here. Let's take this one down to 0.6 or up, I'm sorry. And then for the last one, it's going to be 0.4. All right, so we have like a lighter, then darker, and then even more dark. So you get the idea. It kind of like randomly puts it out there. But here's what I want to do. I want to adjust the width, because right now it looks a lot like the brick. But if you pull on it, you can create stripes. So we're going to go all the way to 100. So that's good. It's kind of going from left to right. I want for it to go from the back forward. So we need to rotate it 90 degrees. Now you can do it a number of different ways. You can go into UVs, rotate it, but I'm just going to select this and press R to rotate it, and then Z to rotate it on Z, and then type 90 degrees. Boom. Or again, you can do it in here. Essentially, I just selected this, went over here, and rotated it right there. Very simple. So now it's pointing towards us. Now I need to do one more thing. Right now, this right here, this tile is kind of applied to the base color, but I wanted for it to be applied to the reflection or to the roughness, right? So I'm going to just move it right over here. And now it is applied to the roughness, and make sure the base color is black like it is right now. So if I press 0 on the numpad, this is the camera view. You can see that the stripes are going towards us, and it does create that depth, which is good. So it's looking great so far. So let's do the same thing for the ceiling. We're going to select the ceiling, and we can do the same thing. We're going to go to the material tab or here, doesn't matter. And we have already created this stripes material, so we don't need to create a new one. We can just click over here and we can pick from the list that we have so far. We have stripes, so select it. It's looking good. Just to be safe, I'm going to select this plane. Make sure, by the way, if something's like competing with your selection, if you press Alt and click, then you can kind of choose what you want to select. So I'm going to say ceiling, boom. Press tab to go into edit mode, and then press U to go into UV mapping options. So in here we have cube projection. So click on it, and let's see. Yeah, just to be safe. Sometimes you want to make sure it's projecting the right way. So I'm going to press 0 on my numpad here, and that's what we're looking at. As you can see, we have our floor set up and also the ceiling. All right, so let's create wall materials. And by wall, I mean this object right here that we created. Now, here's a problem. Like, I want to be able to select this object, and I want to solo it because I don't want to have all these LED panels in the way. I want to only see that object. How can I do that quickly without unchecking all of these collections? Well, there's a quick keyboard shortcut. All you have to do is just press / on your keyboard. So it's a slash that's facing forward. If you do that, boom, it solos it, which is super handy. Now, the problem is it does disable the lights, which can be annoying, but it's okay. We can go to preview, material preview mode, and everything's lit. So that's great. Now we can take it a step further. We can also, when you select this and press tab to go into edit mode, we still see the mirror modifier and bevel, but you can disable that in edit mode. And you can do that by going to modifiers. You can disable mirror and edit only, and the same thing for bevel. So when you press tab to go into object mode, you can still see it, but when you go into edit mode, you don't, which kind of simplifies things and makes things a lot more enjoyable to work. So here's what I want to do. We're going to go hit tab to go into object mode. We're going to apply a material to the entire thing. We're going to go to material tab. We're going to apply a material that we have already created, the stripes. When you click on it, it applies it. Now, the problem is it's not applying it the right way. It's kind of too skinny. I mean, we need to basically UV unwrap this thing. So we're going to select it, press tab to go into edit mode, press 3 to go into face mode, press A to select all of the faces, and then press U to see all of our UV mapping options. And we're going to say cube projection. So that's how we're going to unwrap it. And if you press tab to go into object mode, you can see it's working well. Now, the problem is we have this frame right here that has all that extra detail. And for that frame, I just want for it to be just a solid black. So we're going to press tab to go into edit mode. And right now, obviously, all these lines kind of hard, making it hard to select my faces. So I'm going to go into solid mode. So that's looking better. So now I'm going to select this face and then control click on the last face. So it's going to select everything in between. Then I'm going to hold shift to add on to the selection and alt at the same time and click on in between of these two faces. Then I'll select the entire loop, which is good. Now we need to do the same thing for that one as well. So shift alt and then click here. So now we've made that selection. And now we need to apply a different material. So right now, I'll go here. I don't know if you probably can't see it, but you can still see detail, right? Well, the problem is we already have a material applied to this object. How can I apply multiple materials to this object to different areas? Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do here. Well, to do that is quite simple. You just click on this plus sign to create another slot. And this time we're going to reuse a material. You can either create a new one or we're going to reuse one. So we're going to click here and we're going to use this material that's called material. It's obviously a default material that came with the project, but we're going to convert it into material that we need. We're going to call this one black. Okay. And then we're going to make it the base color black, probably not all the way, like 0.05. That's good. And as you can see, we'll still see the detail. Well, the reason why, because as you have your faces selected, you want to hit assign. So select this black and then assign, and then boom, it will automatically assign it. Very handy. So now I'm going to press tab on my keyboard and go to the object mode. You can see that we get a nice solid black color without any of that detail, which is good. So I want to do one more thing before we do the wall lights. So in the animation, we're going to go through this stuff, and I want the back of it to be transparent. Right now, it's not. We have all this information here, but we want for it to be transparent. Now, obviously, I can go into edit mode by pressing tab, and I can select all these faces, and I can delete them. But the problem is, when you delete them, you still see stuff in here as you fly through it. I want to be able to not see anything. So let me show you how. Let's go into solid mode so we can see our faces. We're going to select this face, control select that one to select everything in between. And this time, we're going to create another slot. Basically, we're going to create another material, and we're going to create a new material this time. We're going to say new material. We're going to call this one hold out. And then in here in surfaces, instead of principled, we're going to click here and we're going to select hold out. Now watch what happens. Obviously, we haven't assigned it yet. Let's go to rendered view, and nothing's happening here yet. But once we select it and press on assign, watch this. Boom, it makes it transparent. I'm going to press tab to get out of it. Notice it is transparent. It's super handy for all kinds of things. So even when you go on this side, everything's transparent, because right now you should be able to see that, right? Well, you're not. I mean, it's cutting everything behind it. The same here, right? As you fly through it, you should be able to see these edges. Well, not anymore. It is time to create wall lights for these walls, and we're going to go into solid view so we can see better. We're going to apply that wall light material to these carved areas right here. So we're going to select this object, press tab to go into edit mode, and make sure you are in faces. So press 3 and then deselect all of them by pressing Alt A. And then we're going to select this face, shift select that one, and then shift select this one, and then control select that one. So it's going to select everything in between. So shift select this face, control select that one. You get the idea. It's going to select the entire loop. Then we're going to press shift alt and then click in here to select this entire loop right here. So we're going to go over here to the material tab. We're going to press on this plus sign to create a new slot. We're going to click on this new button to create a new material. We're going to call it, let's call it wall lights. Okay, so then we want to change this from principal to emission, and we're going to crank this up to 2, and we're going to leave it white for right now. By the way, the same thing again here can also be changed in here as well. So as you can see, color strength is set to 2, just like it is here. So then we want to go to rendered view, and right now, obviously nothing is going on here, but our faces are selected. So once you've selected all your faces, you can select your material and then make sure you hit assign. So when you do that, it works like a charm. So as you can see, it's working well, but we're not done yet. So we're going to select this emission node. We're going to press Control T to add more nodes. And at this point, you're familiar with these nodes. We have 3 nodes. So we have UVs that we're grabbing from the object. And then we have a mapping node that we can move our texture around. And then we have this image node. And for the image, we need to load an image. So click on open. And then we're going to go to tutorial assets, images. By the way, all of these images are included in a download project file. So make sure you download the project file and then you can follow along. So we're going to select this arrow texture and then we're going to click on open image. So now it is loaded. As you can see, it kind of is there, but it's kind of hard to see. So we need to take this down in size big time. So we're going to go to this mapping node, and for scale, for X, we're going to take it up to 50, and Y, the same thing for Z. So we're going to change all 3 of them to 50. And right away, you can see it's looking much better. So we need to do some more adjustments. I'm going to hit tab to go into object mode. You can see it better this way. So here's what I want to do. For white areas, I want to assign this light blue. And for dark areas, I want to assign this dark blue. And to do that, we're going to use a node called color ramp. So hover your mouse over here, press Shift A, and we're going to search for, let's do ramp. There you go, color ramp. We're going to click over here, and then we're just going to put it right in between this image node. And there you go. So obviously nothing changed because this ramp goes between white and black. So for white, we're going to click here and we're going to click in this area. We're going to use eyedropper and we're going to select the lighter blue. And as you can see, it's working. So then we're going to click on this black color and we're going to change it from black to darker blue. So obviously it's working well. Now we're going to do some more things. We're going to add some kind of texture, some kind of lines to make it look like a, I don't know, like it's not just a flat surface. So we're going to press Shift A to bring in a new node. We're going to search for it. We're going to call this one brick. So we know brick node very well at this point. So we're going to click here and just drop it right there in between 2. Now you want to make sure you grab the UV and attach to the vector because we want to make sure we're grabbing the same UVs. And I'm going to select this node and then shift select that one. So both of them are selected. And we're going to press Control asterisk to basically like connect together both of them into this multiply node. And then I'm going to move these around. By the way, you can select all 3 of them and use Shift = shortcut. It will kind of straighten it for you. Then you can move them. It's very handy. So this is what we did. We created those arrows and we created like a brick texture and they're kind of multiplied together in this node. Now I want to do this. I want to go to this brick texture, and for color 1, I'm going to take it all the way to white. And then I'm going to click on this color and then drag and drop it over the top of the second color so it will replace it. So both of them are white. That's exactly what I want. Scale, let's take it up to 160. And for the width, let's take it all the way to 100. So now you can see we've created something interesting. We have those lines going across. So it just gives more detail. It looks better. So now we need to animate this. So to do that, we're going to go to this mapping node and we can animate it on X, right? We can go this way, but I don't want to be setting keyframes and stuff like that. What I want to do, I want to use something similar to what we used like in After Effects, expressions, right? We can write a little code and we'll do that for us. Well, we can do that using a driver. So you can hover over this value, right click, and then go to add driver. When you do that, this window will pop up. Get rid of this. And let's just type frame. And frame is just a keyword that refers to the time indicator. So wherever you are, that's where it's going to reference. But the beautiful thing about frame, when it is animating, like when the value is moving, the frame value is moving as well. So it almost like an engine, it just generates something that's moving. So we can use that and we can divide it by 20. And let's click away here. And now this value is lit up in, what is it? Pink purple, purple. And if I press play, you can see it is moving, which is great. That's exactly what I need. But we're not done yet because we do have some issues. So right here, I noticed we have some issues in the UV. So it didn't unwrap it the way I wanted it. So yeah, all these areas need to be fixed. I'm going to select this, the walls. We're going to press tab to go into edit mode. And we only want to select, like if you deselected everything and you want to select those faces, I don't want to be selecting them again. But what you can do, just select the wall lights right here and then click on select. And what it will do, it will select the faces that this wall lights is applied on, which is really handy. So now you can see them in our UV editor. You can see we have the first line, second, and third. So it's the same thing as you can see here, first, second, third. But the way it's laid out here is different from here. In a 3D world, it's like in a 3D world, right? But in here, it's those faces laid out flat, which is how we can apply texture. But we need to adjust some of these faces. So here's what we want to do. So I'm going to kind of cheat a bit. So I know that this issue right here, make sure you are in face mode. I'm going to select this face because that's where it starts. It starts with this face. Then I'm going to control select that face. And then I have all of those faces selected. And right away, you can see it only highlights those faces. So that's good. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to select this face, control select that face. And then let's see. It's kind of hard to see on that one. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be this face and then control select that face. So we made the selection for all those faces that are giving us issues. So I'm going to select them in here, select the move tool and kind of move them out of the way for right now. Okay. But if we go back over here and select this material and select all of our faces that this material is applied on, you can see now we can clearly see those faces. And here's what we can do. By the way, if you hover your mouse over this and press Control Spacebar, it will go full screen. So now you can kind of quickly go full screen on any areas you want. Very handy. So now I can do this. I can try to do this. I can select maybe this face right here, all the faces, and then I can move it closer and kind of adjust it in here. Now, obviously, I don't want to be moving this. You can press G. It's the same thing. And if you press X, it will lock it in on X. So you can kind of line them up like that. And, you know, if you press Control Spacebar to go in here, you can see it kind of fixed it. I mean, that's perfect. Actually, it did fix. But there's a much quicker way to do that. Let me undo all of this. You can just press, while you have them selected, you can press V for stitching, and then boom, it will stitch. It's the same thing as clicking right click and then clicking on stitch, but I'm using V shortcut. And it will automatically snap them together and boom, it's working well. The same thing for that. So I'm going to press Alt A to deselect everything. Select these, press V, boom, it will kind of stitch it over there. Again, select this, press V, it will stitch that. But obviously, it kind of moves it around. It doesn't really matter where it's at on the X for me. So I think that's fine. Now, the only other problem is like these and those, they're not really lined up. Like I want that arrow to be in the center. So here's what we want to do. I'm going to press Alt A to deselect everything. And then I'm going to press Control Spacebar so I can see better. I'm going to select all the bottom faces and then press Control Spacebar to get out of it, right? If I zoom in really tight, I can basically move it right here, kind of line it up. If you move too far, you can see it right there. But obviously you can kind of center everything like this. You can do the same thing for those. So I'm going to select those faces. So let's do that. Press Alt A to deselect. Let me select this. Let's see what it does. If I press V, all right, it will attach it. So just to make sure it's attached, but I'm not sure what that was. So I'm going to select all of these again, the middle line. Press Control Spacebar to get out of it. So now we have that middle line here selected. We're going to zoom right in and now we can move it up. So let's see, make sure it's positioned in the right place. Yeah, that's pretty close. So yeah, it's centered and the same thing for that. So just go over here. Again, it's a tedious process, but it's not that difficult. A lot of people are kind of scared of UVs, but they don't need to be scary. You can just use them for what you want to use them for. You can spend many hours trying to fix everything, but you don't want to do that. So let's do the same thing here. Let's kind of adjust it in here. I'm going to press G and Y. It's the same thing, just much better. So yeah, we fixed all of our lights in here. Let's press Tab to get out of the edit mode into object mode. And then let's press on our / to get out of the solo mode. All right, so we have one last material to create, and it is the LED screen graphic, which will go into these LED panels. But we want to fix something really quick. I noticed we have some of these lights popping out, and what we need to do, we need to move these LED panels slightly forward to where they line up with this frame right here, and that will cover these lights. So let's select one of them, press Shift G to select the entire collection, and we'll select all of our LED panels. and then we can move it forward like this. Now we want to move it exactly on the Y here, -0.1. When you do that, it will line up with our right here frame, which is exactly what I want to do. And that will cover all of our lights in here. So that's good. So now we're going to select one of these LED panels. We're going to solo it by pressing / key on our keyboard. And we're going to go into material preview. And in here, our LED panel actually already has a black material applied. And the reason why, because we started with the default cube, and that default cube already had a default material that we later converted into a black material. So that's how we arrived here. Now I'm going to press Control Spacebar to get out of this full screen mode. And we're going to press Tab to go into edit mode. Make sure you are in face mode. We're going to select this face right here. And we're going to keep it black for the entire thing. Now the front face, this one right here, I want for it to be the LED screen graphic. That's where we're going to place our animated motion graphic piece, which we will create in the next video. But for right now, we need to create a default texture that we can later replace for the real thing. So we're going to select this face. We're going to go to the material tab. And in here, we're going to create a new slot. And we're going to make sure to create a new material. So click on new material. We're going to call this one LED screen graphic. Then click on assign. It's going to assign it. We're going to replace it for emission. And in here, we're going to select this, press Control T to add extra nodes that we are very familiar with. So I don't have to explain here, but instead of loading our image or our animation, because we don't have it yet, we're going to create that in the next video. So we're going to create a placeholder. So we're going to click on this new button and we're going to call this placeholder LED panel placeholder. It's going to be exactly actually 2000 pixels by 1000. And instead of blank, we're going to set this to UV grid. And once you press OK, notice it applies it. So it does work. It's going to be a great placeholder. And we're going to press Tab to get out of this edit mode. Press / to get out of the solo mode. We're going to go into rendered view. So now we have one LED panel that kind of works, right? We still need to adjust it. So what we need to do, we need to do the same setup for all of them. So we're going to link all of those to this material. And to do that, just select this one, shift select basically all of them, and be sure you shift select this panel very last. So that's the last thing you need to select, and then press Control L to link materials. So when you do that, it will link them, but obviously it doesn't assign it to the faces. So what we need to do, make sure all of them are selected, press Tab to go into edit mode, and then just shift select all of those faces. Once you have all of them selected, then we need to go over here to Material tab, select this LED screen graphic, and click on Assign. When you do that, it will assign all of them. That looks great. It's exactly what I want to do. But it is not projecting right. As you can see, it's very distorted. They should be like perfect squares, and they're not. So what we need to do, we need to go to From View. So from here, just hover your mouse here, press the tilt button, and go to Front View. And now we are looking at it from the front view, and that's how we're going to project it. So we're going to press U, and instead of clicking on Q projection, we're going to go to this Project From View Bounds. When you do that, it works just fine. As you can see, it projected it well. You can actually see it in here as well. So we're going to do this. Make sure, instead of colors, we're going to switch this to LED panel placeholder. And let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's exactly what we want. As you can see, it's 2000 by 1000. It's all looking great. So now once we have the actual animation, we can load it up and it's going to replace it and it's going to perfectly go in there. But before we do that, one more thing I want to do. Now hit Tab to get out of the edit mode. And I want to do this. So for the LED graphics, I want to also add these lines in here as well, so that it just adds another kind of detail thing to where it looks like an LED panel. So let's do that right now. And we're already here, but actually we're going to go back into this light, and we already have this texture that we have created. So we're going to select this, press Control C to copy it. We're going to select one of those LED panels. Doesn't really matter because the same material is applied to all of them. And then we're going to paste it in here, press Control V. So there it is. And now we just need to link up the UV to vector. And then we're going to select this one, shift select that one. So we have both of them selected. Press Control and then asterisk, and it will basically connect them together into this multiply node. And then we can kind of line them up. Remember, you can select all of them, press Shift equal sign to align them, and then you can position them better. All right, so right now, as you can see, it kind of works, but the lines are too small. I mean, you can keep them the way they are right now, but I'm gonna go over here, and instead of doing it 160, we're gonna set it to something like 50. So you can see this gap kind of looks somewhat similar. Before we wrap up this video, there's one last thing we need to do, and that is to import an HDRI into our scene right here. And it's really easy to do in Blender. Let me show you how. So right now we have this shader editor. Instead of object, we're gonna switch it to world. And it's the same concept. We're gonna press a home key to see all of our nodes. And right now we have this background node. Now this is where you can change the color of your background environment. Right now it's set to transparency, but if you turn off the transparency, it will have a color. Right now it is a gray color, but you can change it to any color. But we don't want a color, we want an HDRI, because HDRI will actually help us quite a bit. It's gonna give us some highlights to the edges here. It will kind of pop the foreground from the background. So that's why we need it. So here's what we need to do. We're gonna select this node. We're gonna do something we've done before many times. We're gonna press Control T, and as you can see, it adds more nodes like always. And this time we have this node right here called Environment Texture. So this node is what allows us to load an HDRI. So we're gonna click on Open. We're gonna navigate over to the HDRI, and we have this HDRI. By the way, you can download this one for free. The link to it is at the bottom of this video. So make sure you click on it, download it. And this one was created by Chris Watson from Fox Sports. You can see his work at chwatson.com. He's a good friend of mine. He's super talented. I work with him at Fox Sports. I learned a lot from him. So check out his work, like his videos, subscribe to his stuff. He's got some cool stuff that you can purchase. So yeah, chwatson.com, check it out. So we're gonna use this one. And by the way, Chris, thanks for letting me use this. Press Open, and then we have an HDRI. You can kind of see it. Well, we can't see it right now because we have transparency, but let's do this. We're gonna go and film. We're gonna uncheck this. You can see that HDRI is loaded, but we're gonna turn on our transparency. I just wanna show you that it is there. Now, obviously it's a bit too hot. It's way too hot. So we're gonna go over here to strength, and we're gonna tone this down to maybe something like 0.1. Let's press 0 to see what the camera looks at. But we do want to rotate this on the Z right here. You can rotate this. You can see what it does, maybe like 90 degrees. Let's do 90. Yeah, 90 degrees does well. You can see it adds some highlights right here. Let's press Control Spacebar. You can see it better. So yeah, you can definitely see highlights. It pops it from the background, which is exactly what I want. So that's all I need. You can even tone it down if you want, but for me, it's gonna work. And that's it. That's all we're gonna do for this video. In the next video, we're gonna create the motion graphic piece, then we're gonna put it into this LED panel. We're gonna do some compositing, animation. So we have a lot more to go. I'll see you in the next video.